Hello Year 9, we're going to be continuing on from our last weaving lesson. Here's some of the materials we will need. A range of yarn such as ribbon, some velvet yarn, some lace, some general wool, some shoe laces, and a variety of different other yarns. A comb, scissors. So first I'm going to start with my shoelace. And remember, you're going under and over, and you're to follow this pattern throughout. So under, over, under, over. We're aiming to use at least 4 different types of yarns. So this is my first experimental yarn which I'm going to use. So you just pull it on through, and you can use your comb to beat it down into place. To go back again, remember we're going to follow in the opposite direction. So if you've went under, over, you're now to go over, under. You'll be able to look and see if you have went under or over in the previous row that you have woven. So you just want to gently pull it through, and remember about your selvage at the end, just to pull it out, because we do not want our weave to go in the ways. So just beat it down again with your comb, and you can just trim the ends when complete. And you just want to neatly tuck it in at the back to secure. So now we're going to move on to our next yarn. So for this I'm just going to use some standard wool just to secure my shoelace. Again, I'm just following under, over, under, over. Another way to remember is that you can always lift up the second warp thread. So you go under one and lift up the second. To secure my wool, I'm just going to tie a small knot, like so. Feed it through, make sure to pull tight, and you can snip with scissors. So I'm just now going to weave another couple of rows of this, and remembering under, over, under, over. You can use a plastic needle if you prefer. I myself just prefer working with my hands. So I'm just going back in again with the over-under pattern. Now that I have finished weaving a couple of rows, I'm just going to tie a knot again. Pull to secure and trim. I'm now going to use some of this textured velvet yarn just to add a little bit of an interesting texture to the weave. Sometimes when you're using different types of yarns, they could be a little bit more tricky due to, you know, them being a little bit slippy, or they may just be very awkward to weave in and out of your warp. It just takes a little bit of extra time and just being a little bit more careful. So again, I'm just beating it down, and as you can see, the yarn isn't completely staying in place, but once you weave your next row it will. So you just gently thread your yarn through. Make sure to leave a small selvage at the end and beat down with your brush. So now that I am happy with this, I am just going to tie a knot again. And it's always important to secure each row that you have woven, because you don't want it to fall out, so it's better just to trim and to secure as you go. So next I'm going to use a thicker wool, and you will notice that it adds a little more texture to your weave and adds another interesting element. With the thicker yarn, you need to make sure that you have secured it correctly, as it can come loose. You can experiment with the length of rows in your weft. For some, as you can see, I have done really thick, and some I have done quite fine. So it's entirely up to you. Next, I'm going to use a more finer shimmery yarn. And what I've done is I've actually doubled it up, because it's quite similar to embroidery thread, and just to get the best effect. Working with yarn such as this can be quite fiddly, but just make sure to take your time. So at the moment I've used quite a couple of different types of yarn. So I have used shoelace to add an experimental element. I have used some velvet textured yarn. I have used a more thicker yarn, and I am now using this shimmery embroidery fabric. So this is another experimental piece that I'm going to use. So I'm going to experiment with some lace. With lace you can use the full width of the lace, but just to get a bit more texture I want to scrunch it up and have it folded over. So this is now another experimental yarn that I've used on top of the shimmery embroidery thread, the more thicker yarn, the velvet textured eyelet yarn, and a shoelace. And as you can see, it all creates lots of different types of styles and effects. So I'm just scrunching it down, and you can play about with it till you get your desired effect. And just make sure to secure at the end and snip. At a later stage you can thread in the lace at the back of your sample. So to secure, I'm just going to use another of the general standard yarn that we have been using previously, and I find it's quite good just to add it in between anything that may move at all, such as the shoelace, and it's just to really secure it. Next, I'm going to use some of this very light ribbon. I think it's quite nice to mix the textures in between some of your general wool or your yarn. So I'm trying to alternate between the both. And as you can see, I'm kind of mixing up my colours. So my colour palette is a mix of pinks, mustard yellow, and then I've added a little bit of an interesting element with the lovely brightly coloured shoelace. So I'm really working my piece around the shoelace and adding in some complementary colours just to make it sit well together. So as you can see, I have used a different range of yarns. And now just for the finishing off, I am going to turn my piece upside down as I find it's quite easier to work with. And I'm going to add a really small little bit of this boucle yarn. Again, just to secure the ribbon. At this stage it will be a lot tighter to weave in your weft. Just be very, very careful and take your time. Make sure to really gently beat down, because you'll be amazed at how much extra space you have. To complete my weave, I am going to go back to the first yarn that I have used at the very top, this pale pink wool, and I'm going to weave just a few rows of it just to secure my weave. It is best to start and end with your general standard yarn or wool to secure your weave as best as possible for when you cut it off and tie it up. So now that I have finished my weave, I'm just going to again tie a knot, put tightly and secure, and that is our woven sample finished. So this is just an idea of one colour scheme and some different yarns and fabrics. So as you can see, I've used a real mix of both colours and textures of yarn. And here's another idea. So as you can see, I've used different types of colours and yarn as well. Just to recap, I would like you to be as experimental as possible using a range of different exciting, bold, fun and textured yarns. The more that you use, the more exciting your piece will be, and also to be bold and daring with your colour choices. So instead of just using one or two colours, it would be really good to use at least 4 colours, and you can take inspiration from anything for the theme of your colour palette. So just as I have shown in my example, my colours are influenced and inspired by that really bold, colourful shoelace. The best of luck, and I cannot wait to see all your wonderful woven samples.